Welcome to the Orbital Sunrise podcast, sharing ideas that are catalysts for action to drive an inclusive and equitable world. Your hosts are
Elizabeth Harrison, ocean engineer, presenter, and engineering communicator and futurist.
And Ruth Harrison, aerospace engineer, space industry communicator, and diversity advocate.
This Orbital Sunrise podcast will educate and empower people by sharing the impacts of STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths. Our Series 1 key themes are unpacking the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 8, economic growth, humanising STEM, thought leadership, and engineering futurist.
We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are broadcasting today, acknowledge their continuing connection to the land, air and sea, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. If you would like to support our podcast, please share with your friends, leave a review, or check out our Patreon site. Welcome to episode 3 of the Orbital Sunrise podcast.
Today we welcome Tony Tan. Tony is an entrepreneur, founder, and CEO of a new life science and biotech company. He's passionate about sustainability and technology as a means to tackle some of the world's greatest challenges. He's been featured on ABC's Q&A program, and he advocates for greater commercialisation of Australian research, having worked with the Australian National Science Agency to develop a world-leading new product, amongst other things. So welcome, Tony.
Hey guys, super excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So what are your pronouns?
He, him, his.
Great. And so, Tony, given that elevator pitches are definitely one thing to do, would you be able to give us your personal elevator pitch, please?
Yeah, of course. So basically, my name is Tony Tan, and I'm an entrepreneur from Melbourne. We specialize in creating coatings for killing pathogens. And we started off, I guess, in a really weird, we didn't start there. We started off in silicone and creating sustainability products. But we ended up going down this route because basically when the pandemic happened, everyone cared about how clean, how sanitary, all reusable products were. So that's how we sort of got started in this area. And then I suppose I fell into working with the CSIRO. They seem to like me. I like the research they do. So, we started working together. Yeah,
great. That's awesome. And you mentioned you're in Melbourne. So where are you, or based in Melbourne? Where are you talking to us from today, Tony?
So I'm in the, family-friendly Glenferrie area of Hawthorne. Lots of young people, lots of, interesting things, cafes happening. I literally just came from an investor meeting just before this. So, always talking about my startup, always pushing that narrative, thanks so much for having me.
So, Tony, you said you're in a cafe in leafy Hawthorne. Glenferrie?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What's your drink of choice, Tony?
Oh, I'm a big kombucha fan. I can drink kombucha till my caffeine limit, I guess. But it's that little bit of fizz, it's that little bit of alcohol that gets traced in. I don't know what it is. It's a combination, isn't it? But that's my drink of choice.
And what's your snack of choice from your local cafe?
Oof, there's so many good options, but I think the one that really stands out to me is a truffle mushroom toasty. It's a combination of all of those, delicious umami sort of flavors from the cheese, and you have to have a selection of cheese. You can't just have one. It's not just mozzarella. No, that's too basic. But you need to have mozzarella, Gruyere, Camembert, you mix it all in. You add that drizzle of oil from the truffle, and it'll change your life.
That sounds great.
I can't say I've ever had one of those, and now I really want one.
You're missing out, Ruth. What are you doing? How do you know? I don't know if they don't have it in Brisbane, but oh man, it's all the rage here.
thank you, Tony. You've changed my life. I need to go and now try the truffle toasty. So tell me a little bit about yourself. We're a big believer that companies are shaped by the people that are invested in them. So tell me, what drove you to kind of sustainability? How did you end up, is that a passion of yours? And how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started off in environmental science. So that was really the area that I was passionate about. And I guess the reason why I went down the entrepreneurial route rather than a research route was because I just felt like society has lots of great scientists, but how many of them get ignored? How many of them will publish for that research just to be out there? And why aren't we getting more of these innovations out into the world? And so I guess that for me is I'm a scientist who never became a scientist, but instead went down the route of trying to, get science out to the people. So I think that's probably where it's all sort of started.
Science out to the people. That's so great. We definitely need more of that.
Why do you think scientists do get ignored? Why are we so quick to judge science as something that's not popularist or doesn't meet our narrative? What are the problems there?
I think there are multiple, I guess, facets to that because, science is something that's constantly evolving. So what we thought maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago can dramatically change to what we think now. Like, you talk of things like flat Earth. You can talk things like, vaccine research. You can talk things like, just all of the things that we thought about quantum physics have changed in the last 5 to 10 years. And so it's very much trying to deal with the notion that it's getting updated all the time and people being like, well, this isn't what you said 5 or 10 years ago, and trying to overcome that. But like it is hard, but I feel like there is a way to do it. I think secondly, it's very much around that communication. Like as a stereotype, scientists aren't very good at communicating the science. Their skills specialize in the lab techniques. Their skills specialize in just really making sure that what they're doing is right. And so it's very much less about communicating it for them than it is to actually do the fundamental research. And so I think having people that can bridge that gap and bridge the gap between, just an innovation that's published in an article to actually getting it out into a real life product, I think that's really important.
That brings me on to a question that we had for later, but I'm going to bring it up now. So you were on Q&A, you put your question out there. How did you feel about the response that you got, and what can we do better as far as getting innovation to commercialization? Because that's one thing I hear quite a lot, is that we're not very good. There's this massive gap between innovation and commercialization and actually getting something achieved from all of these brilliant ideas. So how can we do that better? And, the response you got wasn't exactly what I would have liked to have heard personally. So what did you think of it?
Look, I think we can all agree that politicians are politicians. I think their job is really to say nothing in response to anyone that brings up anything. I think I had a very specific question, and just to recap for your listeners, it was really around, how Australia retains talent and how Australia manages to, lose a lot of its innovation overseas. The example I used was the fact that our company wasn't eligible for these government grants that was, throughout COVID, including specifically the cash flow boost. And I guess it's just one of those things when you hear the response from a politician, it's usually like, oh yeah, we're doing this, we're doing this. But a lot of the time it's not enough. So what I would love to see is just more engagement from people in Canberra with, local people who are in that innovation ecosystem. That includes the researchers, that includes the startup companies that are doing, and it includes just policy that will enable more of this to happen. So I guess, yeah, people can look up the response from the senators if they would like, for both Labor and Liberal. So, but in saying that, look, benefit, you got to give them, credit where it's deserved. And I think one of the interesting things that came off that Q&A chat was, Senator Patterson actually spoke to us afterwards and engaged with us afterwards. And I think, I can't tell you for certain, but I actually do think that the new patent box policy that's been enacted for medical and biotech companies, reducing the tax rate for patents that get commercialized, is a direct response to that. So, and we need more things like that.
That's great. So you'd kind of say, look, just tell people what you need, because that sounds like a good policy came out of a discussion that didn't seem to be going your way at the time, but has made people think around what they could do better, which is great to hear. So tell us about Silfresh. Where did that kind of come from, and where did that name spout from?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because like what I'm doing now is like, it feels so different, doesn't it? It feels like it's super different from what we were doing initially. But I think that's just the nature of startups, that you pivot a lot, you ask your customers what you're doing, and then you respond to it. So for us, we wanted to create reusable products out of silicone. And these reusable products, the whole aim of it was to reduce the amount of plastic waste that was being thrown out. And we were on a mission to get rid of, 1 million pieces of plastic by 2025. And so that's still our mission. Don't get me wrong, that's still in there. But I think for what we found as the pandemic rolled along was that, hey, people were just not, like the response we were getting from our customers was they were really worried about the sanitation aspect of reusable products. And it wasn't just us. It was, if you think Keep Cup, cafes stopped taking Keep Cup. And it was just across the board. And so that's why we started to invest in that R&D and the research around coatings that would kill pathogens. And I guess that's just led on to what we're doing now.
That's a great example around health and protecting the health of people against the environment and that sustainability, like cross section.
Well, it's so important, isn't it? Like, the amount of like waste that's been generated from this pandemic in terms of masks, in terms of medical equipment, in terms of all that kind of stuff. So we need to really be thinking about, and I'm not suggesting at all that, we need to completely get rid of plastic in terms of those important medical areas. I think we need to overall reduce our reliance on this and create an ecosystem that has diversified products that are degradable, that are reusable, that are recyclable, all of those aspects. I think those are the important things that we should be striving towards so we can reduce our impact, especially when the next pandemic happens.
So is there something that, drives you, or you have hope for some legacy of what that legacy is going to be?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, that's a really great question. I think, one thing that this pandemic has really shown is how important our health is, right? We can work to the sun rises the next day, or we can just be so full of our social life. We can do all that kind of stuff, but actually when we don't have our health, it's a real worry. So what I would really love to do is I'd love to become the Moderna of anti-pathogenic coatings, because if you think about the story of Moderna as a startup company, they were not known before this whole pandemic, and it was only after the spur of mRNA vaccines that actually people started to realize who these people were. And so I would love to be able to create, I guess, products that will help people to protect themselves for that next pandemic.
Yeah, that's really interesting around pandemic and crises, around how companies come into existence, where that need is and drive, and there's definitely a really good successful case there with that. So How has your journey evolved over the last few years, and is there kind of a few key things that you've learned along the way?
I mean, a few or like a million. Like, tell me, like, I don't know if you have enough time on your podcast for this, but, like, I think there's a lot that I've learned. One thing I've learned is, your revenue you expect that business growth is this like sort of linear or this, upwards trajectory all the time. But actually it's not. Your revenue might go up heaps and then it will go down. And then you might have time where you need to recalibrate and you need to pivot and you need to look at a different strategy and it's constantly changing. So to just imagine that you're going to have one linear journey is never the case. And that was a surprise to me. I know I sound stupid in saying that, but that was a surprise to me. I guess so, like another thing that I've learned really is around, I suppose, interacting with people and your team. Like, I'm not going to claim that I'm the best manager out there. I saw a TikTok meme where this girl was talking to her manager's phone who they had left it on their desk, and she was saying to the phone how to talk to a group, how to positively impact a team, how to respectfully respond to criticism. And she was doing that because she wanted the phone to pick up on the targeted ads. And so it was like, she wanted her boss's phone to start showing all of those ads, because it's like such a big issue. And I tell you what, one thing that I've really learned from this pandemic is that people need time to recalibrate. People need time to just be able to reflect on themselves. And if you can help them to, figure out what they really want, if you can help them to feel like they're in a safe space that actually they can co-create with you, I think that's a really important one, a lesson that I've learned.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think people really have, everyone's gone through a very big change over the last few years, and being aware of that, and that understanding that we've all had to pivot, whether it's our careers or it's our jobs or it's our companies or just how our life runs. That's a big taxing thing that mental thing that we've had to do. So I find that very, that's so true. And it's something that we have to realize going forward. The world is not the same. We're not going back to the same place we were 3 years ago. And it's different. And there's a little bit of mourning going on, I think, for that as well. People, have to take a bit of time to really understand what that means for them going forward. So yeah, totally agree there.
Oh, 100%. Even just like now that we've let out the working from home bag, that is definitely not like going away anytime soon.
No, it's not. And I think it's really making us look at, what does flexibility mean? It's not what, flexibility can mean so many different things to different people, and it's understanding that there isn't a right and a wrong to it, but it's about understanding what that means to the individual, and how that impacts the way that they work. And I think that's a really good thing for minority groups as well, or people with disabilities, to really look at, like, how can we incorporate their needs better in this flexible world? Because we're not all 9 to 5 people. Some people are better in the morning, some people are better in the evening, some people can't work a full day, and we need to respect that. But what they contribute is still really important. So, I think I'm hoping that this flexibility discussion will really grow from where we've been. And another thing that's positive to have come out of the pandemic is that we're starting to have these conversations.
Oh, 100%, Ruth. You'd preach. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it's one of those things, like, the more flexibility we can provide workers, the less they'll like burn out, the less they'll want to leave your company, the lesser. But even working through that can be quite difficult. Like, it's just, having those conversations, it really does take maturity on both levels. Because some people don't even know what they want, like, they don't know what is the most optimal. They don't know what, like, how they're being. So sometimes the structure can help, but at the same time, you just need to be able to read the situation and the person.
I think sometimes it's the company as well, giving somebody space to try things and go, actually, you know what, that's not working for me, and that's fine. We'll try something different. And I think sometimes not people don't feel comfortable to have a go at things because they're like, oh, if I do this and it doesn't work, then my opportunity's gone to have the flexibility or this. And we really need to start having those discussions around like, let's try some things and be comfortable going, okay, that's not working for both of us. How can we make it work? Sometimes we're a bit scared of those conversations, I think.
Oh, 100%. Oh, you know how it feels to be in those shoes.
Oh yes, the global pandemic has certainly opened my eyes to a lot of things, and it's been a very interesting couple of years.
I'd love to hear about it. I mean, I don't know if that's part of an offline conversation, but I would love to hear our war stories.
I think we'll save that for another time, Tony.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about innovation and sustainability. So we were very much about finding out what works, what's going to work in the future. How can we create a more sustainable future? But what does that actually mean to you, Tony? What does sustainability mean, and what does innovation mean?
I think that's a really good question, because a lot of people, when you talk sustainability, it's sometimes vague. Or you talk innovation, it can be very, very vague. Like, what does that actually mean? So particularly for sustainability, from our perspective, it's really about reducing the impact so that people who are like smaller, who are in the younger generation, or people who are kids can continue to grow up in a way that's healthy, great, that they can share on to their own kids. That's a very general definition, but I suppose like with a still fresh perspective, it would definitely be more around that waste, because we see so much trash being everywhere, whether it's the oceans, whether it's our rivers, whether it's just in a national park where we're going for a walk. It's ridiculous. So I suppose like in terms of sustainability, we'd really love to see an impact in terms of the amount of waste that's being created and reducing that. I guess in terms of answering the innovation question, I suppose innovation is a hard one, because there's so many different ways that you can innovate. You can innovate on a product, you can innovate on a business model, you can innovate in terms of just your process at home when you're cutting, you're doing your work and everyday like life. I suppose the general definition would really be around just improvement, being able to ensure that there is less resources being dedicated to something, or less resources being used to do something even better. I think that's probably a very a generic way of putting it. I'm sure that there can be more resources that are being used to do something better, but ideally what you would want from innovation is one that is effective, one that is obviously very operationally efficient, and you want something that's going to make your life better.
I think I saw a report recently that was saying that a number of people had been tested for their blood, and they found microplastics in people's blood supply, which is, it's not surprising, but it also is surprising at the same time that, one, that the microplastics are so distributed that we're actually ingesting them and they're becoming part of us. So what do you, and obviously this has become a big thing. Everyone's talking about microplastics and how we can reduce them, which obviously comes from plastic waste that's being ground down and things. So what makes what you're doing different to what everybody else is doing, and how have you found that differential?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Like, I think the one that you were talking about is really around the microplastics in human blood that I saw on The Guardian. I think they published it, and they were finding that I think it was like half or over half of people that they tested. Obviously, it was a very small sample size, but the fact that it was getting into kidneys, that it was the fact that it was getting into the liver and staying there, that was a very, very scary reality of what a very dystopian world could look like in the future. And it's very, very scary. But I guess our focus has always been on reducing the amount of waste that's being generated in the first place. I think there's been amazing work that's been done by a lot of people. So like Red Cycle, around actually taking waste that's been, that comes from plastic and making it into new products. But right now there just isn't enough drive for people who want to buy those products. So it's great that we can, that the Australian government is now investing in that Remade in Australia campaign. Absolutely doing the right thing there. But we really need to bring up that demand for recycled products. We need to bring up that demand for creating things that are creating products that are cheap enough to compete with plastic in general. So, and that's obviously going to come. That's pricing is one thing that comes down with with more people buying it, and also making it at larger scale, as well as any innovations around the actual ingredients that are made. But yeah, it's one of those areas that's a real worry for me, and it's one where it's like, well, the way we differentiated was focusing on the reduce aspect rather than the recycle aspect, which is where most of the people focus their attention to. So that's one area that we used to compete. The other area that we sort of specialized in was silicone as a material over plastic, because silicone generally is more durable than plastic, and so when you create products out of it, it does end up being more lasting longer than what you would see with a plastic product. And so that's, again, talks to our ethos of reducing the amount of single-use things that we have. In saying that, silicone isn't recyclable at the moment. And so one of the areas that we really we invested in and we'll continue to invest in is that recycling of silicone as a material. We were exploring a research relationship with the Deakin University, and in particularly their material science department, to see how we can start to take silicone products, not just from sex toys, but from lots of different areas, to actually be able to provide solutions. And so that is where we're working towards pushing the boundaries and competing on a scale in a category that isn't generally, isn't targeted. So yeah, that's how we sort of differentiated our product.
For those at home, could you explain the difference between plastic and silicone? Because, I think a lot of people do get confused and think, silicone's just a different kind of plastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a science perspective, silicone is derived from silica, which is also, another example of sand. So that's where it comes from. It goes through a process to then become that sort of soft, spongy, or that's the soft malleable material that you see. But in terms of plastic comes from hydrocarbons, and so hydrocarbons are generally more, very heavily linked to oil and linked to fossil fuels, and that's sort of the area that we I guess differentiate chemically. In terms of the actual, I guess, final product, the difference between, I guess, silicone and plastic is that silicone can be molded into a lot of different shapes, similar to how plastic is, but that the properties of the silicone are more elastic, and they're more easily, I guess we're finding that actually in our latest research, that it's more easily recycled than plastic, and it's more efficient to be recycled than plastic. So obviously we're still at the very early stages of that, but when we do our costs, when we're doing our analysis as to what the return on investment for this research would be, that's a big consideration, and so that's really exciting to see.
That's great. I wouldn't have thought that silicone was any different to recycle than plastic. And does it have the same kind of life properties in that it's endlessly recyclable, or do you not know yet?
Yeah, you're completely right. We're still at the start and the beginning of that research, but we are very, very excited by the opportunity that's there. And the reality is that plastic recycling, besides sort of maybe bottles, PET, it only gets used once. Majority of plastic, or 80% of plastic, is only used once. So so the work we're doing around silicone itself, which is also currently used once, is really hopefully a game changer. So let's see how we go.
Yeah, hopefully extending the life of plastics and recycling on that, as someone who's kind of helped in order to get oil out of the ground. I want to make sure that the hours that I've had to do for that work are well spent.
That your social conscience is wiped clean by recycling.
Yeah, as someone who's helped get raw materials out of the ground, which are necessary, we're not actually being wasteful for that as well.
100%.
Mm. Okay, so what do you see as some of society's biggest challenges from your world or from living and your working perspective? We might have covered that bit, but is there anything else there?
So your question really is around the biggest challenges that we're facing from in a career perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, people talk about the great resignation that's happening, and we sort of touched on it before. Obviously, millennials, now they've spent a lot of time working from home. They're not going to go back to that. They're not going to go back to full-time work in an office space, and nor should they if the actual space is not safe, right? I think that, ventilation has become a really big issue, and making sure that people feel comfortable in returning to work. I think that's probably a really big one. So, yeah, I think that's probably one challenge. Another challenge, I think, just for people who are early on in their career, really is just understanding, I guess, the power of their leverage, because, I guess when you're young, you feel like you need to be, I guess, pigeonholed into something, and you need to spend a certain amount of time in something or whatever it is. But you actually have great versatility in where you want to go in the future, and that's actually quite powerful, especially if you do a lot of great work for a company. So, understanding what you're inherently good at, understanding how you can leverage being, yourself and doing what you do. I think that's a challenge that millennials now that are coming to age will definitely have to, grapple with. I think finally, in terms of other challenges that I see, I am sort of worried about how this whole thing will play out in terms of the rest of the pandemic, because it's almost like it hit December or January, and then bang, all the lines that were bloody, at the testing sites that, led up into Cuba, just disappeared, completely. No one talked about it anymore, and no one got tested anymore. But does that mean that the actual virus is is gone? No, it doesn't. So, and whether it's Deltacron, whether it's some other sort of thing that's gonna come, I think we don't know yet.
Yeah, the element of unknown, and adapting and being versatile.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is not the end, and even in the future, we're going to have to find ways to work and keep the economy driving and going whilst we grapple with all of these things. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the challenge, or how we approach that.
It's interesting that you say that, about keeping millennials in the workplace. I think as a borderline millennial myself, I was told as a young person, what's your career? What do you want to do for the rest of your life? These choices that we make as a young person. But now I realize that those career paths are very much non-linear. What advice would you give to someone who maybe is struggling with that as a reality for themselves, or trying to understand what skills they do have?
Join a startup. I'm being facetious there, but I think if you're a little bit uncertain about what you're doing, I think we've all been there. We've all been, uncertain about what we're doing. I'm still uncertain about what I'm doing. I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to work hard towards getting it. I know that I'm passionate about it, and I know that I'll I have, even if I have to give up stuff, I'm going to keep doing it. But for someone who doesn't really know, I would say just get out there as much as possible. Take opportunities after work hours that you're currently doing to explore some of those passions, to explore a new design skill, to explore, going out and doing some lion dancing like I did pre New Year's, Chinese New Year, and you'll naturally find that there are different areas that, that are useful for other people, that get paid, that you're passionate about. And I guess I don't know if you guys have heard of that ikigai, like that the Japanese talk about, which is like crossover of something that you're passionate about, something that you can get paid for, and something that you can just continue to do for a long time. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of things that you have to overlap to get to that sweet spot. So yeah, like absolutely. Like I think just explore, just follow little trails of nuts like Hansel and Gretel to find the bloody candy, like to find the witch's hut, and hopefully not get cooked. But but yeah, like just explore and I think that's for anything people do, really. Wouldn't you agree? I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that sounds like it brings back getting like Venn diagram and getting curious, like getting to know what your passions are, just finding out more of that, actions, and exploring, and really kind of delving into that, like exploring, like getting to know getting to know the people that you associate with, not like family, friends, whoever, and other bits associated to your passions.
I also find that, obviously we've taken a like career lens, but what you'll find is there's a lot of people who will work in a team, and the team is just so efficient, so supportive, so, just like exactly how that, we or you as that person is structured, that you actually stay for the team. And I think that's like a really important one, because once you find people who you love working with, whether it's like creating your own independent film and you've got a set of like, the director and the filmmaker and the thing, you'll want to work with them on multiple projects. And yeah, I think that following what they do and following the people that you click with, that's definitely will give you insight into what what you like.
Yeah, that's a really good link to what Ruth was mentioning around how companies are shaped by people. And a lot of people, as soon as someone might leave a company, then you'll kind of, you'll have people that follow that person because they like to work together. So we've got another question for you on that. So what are you reading at the moment, or what have you read or listened to that has changed you or your thinking or outlook in some way?
I'm currently reading Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard much about Chris, but like he works for the CIA, I believe, or the FBI, I can't remember which one. But he basically was the key negotiator in hostage situations. And so there's, situations like where I suppose like companies had people on a ship, and then those would get taken by pirates, like modern day pirates, and he'd have to negotiate their lives. So I think obviously I don't have such a risque like situation happen in my life, but we have to negotiate things every single day, and I think being able to do that well, that's an art, right? Whether it's like talking to your parents about something that you care about, or something that they do that pisses you off, or whether that's talking to your friends about doing like you're getting them to come to a music festival that you want to go to, or even if it's just your housemates, like dealing with the cleanliness issues that come up, or wanting to update like something in your house. Every single day we have negotiations like that, and I think it's so important that we get good at them, because there is definitely a respect from both sides that needs to happen. And you're not always going to get someone who's reasonable. So whether it's pirates or your mum. So like you gotta do what you gotta do. So absolutely would recommend that book.
Yeah, it's a good book. I've read it myself. It's well worth your investment of your time.
Oh yeah. Have you I'm still up to like page 12 or something. So like I still haven't gone through it all. But I know I've watched his masterclass, and that was really, really interesting.
I have to admit, I'm a bit of an 80%er when it comes to books. Like, I'll get 80% of the way through and I'm like, I've got another book to read, I'll move on. So, yeah, I'm not very good at finishing them. I have to admit, they have to be really good. So I think I'm an 80%er on Never Split the Difference. And it was maybe 2 years ago that I read it. So, but it is a good book. So our last question for you today, Tony. So if 42 is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, what do we actually need to achieve it?
So, like, in terms of like that, just so your listeners know, I only realized that it was a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like literally 40 minutes before, before right now. So, that's definitely an interesting point for me. But yeah, look, I think that there are like lots of, I mean, like the thing that happens in the Hitchhiker's Guide is really like, the answer pops out of the computer and it's 42, right? And then like, like people are like, well, what was the question? So like, I mean, like for me, I guess like I feel like there is a lot of things that could be that question, right? And to have 42 as an answer. But I do really believe that, like, we absolutely need to do stuff that's going to inspire people more. Like, I think, when we're coming up to an election, right? And, there's a lot of bullshit that comes out of an election. Like, but I just would love to see leaders in our community that actually, I guess, lead and inspire. I think that's very, very rare. I think it's part communication, part like actually having some good policies. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how the election goes. Because the ScoMo has called it for May 25th. And so yeah, let's see how it goes, especially when families are feeling it right now. Families are have had to hit the brunt of living and working 24/7 with their kids. Families have the interest rate hikes that are coming from the Fed, not the Fed, sorry, the RBA. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on people's lives, and people want something to keep them optimistic. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but like I feel like I just when you asked me that question, I was like 42. I suppose that's the age of a lot of older millennials. Like I don't know if that's and I was like, oh, well, I guess that's relevant to society in general. Like I feel like I'm 42. Like no. Yeah, so I don't know, what do you guys think? Like,
what is a number? I think that's really great around what you said on leaders and inspiration, like actually providing that being inspiring and that inspiration to others. Because once you get that, you get you're empowering people to join and help you on your journey to kind of create better living, purpose, just other fun adventures, other companies. And yeah, I think that's great what you've said there. So
yeah, I mean, it could also be like 42 people in your life that have inspired you. Like I feel like that could be like a the answer, right? Like, and the question is, how many people does it take for me to actually get off my ass and do something? And it's 42. Like, so yeah, let's see how I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe that's a thing that we can put to our audience around who are the 42 people that inspire you to be better, to become better, while you're working in the, companies or work or schools that you're doing. So yeah, so thank you very much for coming on to Orbital Sunrise podcast with Rocket Woman and Ocean Woman.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Tony. It's been a great chat.
Yeah.
And we must have that discussion around, sharing our war stories about startups.
Oh, look, it's an ever evolving story. It just gets longer and longer, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Thanks for having me.